Everybody put your hands together. Method Studios, thank you. Take it away, guys.
Hi, guys. First, I wanted to start off by thanking Roman and Pixologic for inviting us. Great to be here at the Summit. My name is Miguel. I am the character supervisor at Marvel Studios LA.
And I'm Leo Krajden, and I'm a senior 3D generalist in Vancouver.
So we have a few case studies to present to you guys, but first we're going to talk to you about our studio a bit. Cool. So these are some of the current projects we're working on. Godzilla, Aquaman, we're working on a lot of films and commercials. Some of the recent projects we delivered recently were Predators, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, just to name a few. Method is a global company with many locations. Recently added Pune, San Francisco, and Montreal. We specialize in many things, such as feature film, animation, AR, and VR. And here's our current feature reel.
Really be much larger.
Hey, that's how eyesight works, you stupid raccoon.
Don't call me a raccoon!
I meant trash.
Is that better?
It's so much worse.
You son of a...
Ask you a few test questions. Are you ready?
Objection sustained.
No, the witness can object.
Overruled.
Sidebar.
Guilty.
Speculation.
Hearsay.
Bailiff.
Briefcase.
Disregard.
In my chamber.
Stop Beaver on the witness.
I rest.
We could totally be lawyers.
Bang.
Now, whatever you do, don't push this button. Now, repeat back what I just said.
I'm Groot.
That's right.
I'm Groot.
No! No, that's the button that will kill everyone. Try again. We're all gonna die.
Thank you. For the first case study they wanted to present to you guys was how we created Groot for Infinity War. It was a really fun project to work on with a lot of challenges. Here's a few screenshots of Groot in ZBrush. Some facts about him. He was about 508 million polygons all put together and about 289 subtools. When we started with him, he was about 540 or so subtools. You guys can imagine dealing with that many tools. It's pretty insane. Here's a couple more screenshots of the different parts. We had to detail even things you probably never see on the film, but we need to make sure that we were covered for in case there was any close-ups of any different angles. Even down to the toes, bottom of the feet. So one important part of our pipeline that we need to make sure we have for animation is LOD systems, like the level of detail. It's really important for us to make sure we can have something for them to quickly animate and block out their scenes. So ZBrush really helps us with that because having so many subtools makes it kind of difficult to do that real time. So what we did, we dynameshed the entire body and then ZRemesh to generate a sock or one uniform mesh that had all the details you kind of see on the higher resolutions, but it was a lot lighter. And here's a few close-ups of that. You guys can see that it still retains all the silhouette and detail, or at least the primary detail in the mesh. The head, we didn't do that too because we needed to make sure we could animate the mouth. Another really important tool that we had was CC Manager. Because he's so many subtools, we had to find a way to manage that in an easy and quick way. So having this here, we were able to batch rename, organize, and keep everything and make sure that everything's good for us to update. One of the bigger challenges we had with Groot was making sure nothing was intersecting. As you guys can see here, all the vines had to lead up to the core. So this vine has to go from the finger all the way up to the core, the shoulders. And here's a little exploded view to show you guys how those vines and subtools are. Yeah, and that's only half of it.
Just the shell.
Just a shell, yeah. And here's how a lot of that work comes into play, making sure that we have all those vines separate so that when you start animating, you start giving it more sense of anatomy and more like more life to it. When we didn't have that vine sliding, it really felt stale and dead. But even just the tiniest bit of sliding helps. The next thing was, starting from a new character, was making sure that we stay true to the legacy of the old Groot and the baby Groot. I was lucky enough to work on the development of the baby Groot for Guardians 2. So I was able to implement a lot of those features into his face, from the eyes down to his mouth and chin, and then take some of the older Groot's details and implement those onto the head and the neck. So he felt like he was going to evolve eventually to the old Groot. Another big challenge that we were challenged with was we detailed the crap out of him, and then it became too noisy during render time. Depending on the shot, it became too noisy, so we had to figure out a way to remove that. But luckily, ZBrush made it really flexible because we were able to use a layer system, and I think we ended up with like 16 layers. We were able to tweak those to adjust the secondary forms, primary forms, and even some of the tertiary, so we could turn down the noise and find the right balance where it didn't become so noisy, but it still felt really detailed. And here's the final model we ended up with for his face. Here's also some lighting tests or some close-ups of some of the rest of the details once it was finally textured. Here's a turntable of some of the different lighting environments we put him in to make sure he was going to work, especially because he has a few different scenes where he's inside of a spaceship. It's pretty dark. But then there's other scenes where he's fighting Thanos. He's outside in the daylight. So we need to make sure he was going to work for all scenes. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask as well.
Check, check.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Off the top of your head, do you know how big your file is?
Well, we had a challenge with that too. Before 2018.1, we had to split up each file. So it was 4 different files, one for the head, one for the torso, one for the arms, and one for the legs. And each one was about 4 gigs. We were trying not to go over that because it became a bit unstable. And after 2018, we were able to merge everything into one file that was about 9 gigs. But it's very finicky, so. Another thing that we also had to do was create facts for him. Even though he only says, I am Groot, he has to be able to say that in multiple different attitudes. So ZBrush was really helpful to make sure that we can create those blend shapes at a low res and then switch over to the high res to make sure nothing was stretching. So here's a few of those shapes that he was made of. Another big challenge we had was the amount of UDIMs. He was made of over 160 UDIMs because he had extreme close-ups from different angles. So every time we had to export displacement maps, we had to wait 4 to 5 hours at 8K. So that's something you have to account for when somebody asks for an update. So the next section, I'm going to show you guys how we integrated all the detail together. So his arm eventually becomes part of the Stormbreaker. So the demo is going to be based on that, but it applies to the rest of the body or anytime you see a vine. So here's a shot of the Stormbreaker in ZBrush. One important thing for us to make sure that this technique that I'm going to show you guys was going to work is making sure that all the UDIMs or the UVs had to be the same ratio and facing the same horizontal way of placement. So we started off, in order to keep everything normalized, started off by creating 3 different presets in Noisemaker that would help us generate detail quickly and make sure that it was all feeling the same throughout the model. Here are some of the presets that I changed on the base noise. And here's a little demo of how those were created. I'll be talking through this part. So the Noisemaker is really a really cool tool, especially if you're doing any type of human type of skin, because it already looks good right from default. But that's one thing we wanted to kind of remove from this, from our preset, because it comes with a lot of noise. It looks nice, but for ours, it's unnecessary. One of the main things is to make sure we remove the noise scale and also remove some of the other options. So you guys can start seeing how that comes into play here. And by removing those noises, we can start seeing the detail of the alpha. Even though it's repeating, it really helps to make sure we have variation. So once I created one of those presets, all 3 presets, then from there I give that to different artists to apply and start just baking into the mesh, as you guys can see here. This is just a quick demo, so I didn't make them in layers, but when we were doing it, we created everything in layers. So we had 3 different layers, so in case we need to dial some stuff in or out, we could. One of the challenges that came up with that, as you guys can start seeing, is that the more noises you apply, the more inflated the surface becomes. And we wanted to make sure that it stayed the same size. The one thing we did was making sure that we made all the adjustments for the overall size and subdivision level 1, as you guys can see here. And we found that -5 inflate really got us back to the original size. But if we went back to subdivision level 6, we retain all the detail from the surface noise. So this became like a rinse and repeat type of technique where, we had about 200 and something vines. So it took us like a day or 2 to go through all the vines and apply this technique to it. Another challenge that came up was sometimes we had UV seams. But that was a really easy fix. You guys can see right now, I'll show up how we fix some of those. So it was pretty simple. We just went down to a lower subdivision level, smoothed that section that had some UV seams. And then from there, we used one of the same alphas we used for one of our presets to apply that as a stamp. And that made it feel pretty seamless. And this was much easier than having an artist go around the whole 360 of the tube and try to detail it out, where most of the time you might not see any of the inside. So you can see that here, that alpha being applied. And that fixes that patch. So here's some more rinse and repeat. As you can see, even though it's the same 3 different presets, when you put them next to each other, they don't feel the same. But they feel like they were the same type of wear and tear. And here's the Stormbreaker and ZBrush fully detailed. And here's some stills of the look dev. But yeah, this is how maybe 75% of the model got created for all the detail, and then the rest was custom or just hand sculpting. Any questions? Cool. For the next case study, I want to show you guys how we create creatures and animals in our pipeline, whether we have 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Now's probably a good time to take advantage. You guys not going to be roaming around Sunset Boulevard. If you have questions, it's probably the best time to throw them at Miguel, because he's quite busy.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Don't be shy. This is not the place to be shy. Okay? And I think there you go. We've got one. Let me turn this on for you. Not the place to be shy, believe me. Okay, take it away. What's your name? That's Norm. Hey, Norm.
Pretty awesome. The subtools that you're doing, the poly count when you're in the Dynamesh, what is the poly count for each of those subtools, or do you keep track of this undo steps when you're saving these files? Because that makes these files huge, no?
Yeah, so once we figured out the final look, we started breaking down the layers, because that started incrementing the file size over 4 gigs. So we always have to make sure we're mindful of where we started with the base, no detail, to the detail version. I don't remember the specific Vine number, detail, but I know we make sure we went up to level 7 of subdivision for each piece. And at some point, I think some inner pieces that you don't see as much, we went down to level 6. But we still retain the detail, it just got a little blurrier.
Sure.
Thanks.
We got another one way in the back here. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we've opened Pandora's box, and you see
Bring 'em
questions way out here in the back. There you go.
Hey there. The screenshot you showed earlier showing the hierarchy of subtools, was that within ZBrush?
Yes, it's a plugin, CC Manager. Yeah, because since we had so many tools, that was the only way to really manage things. And also, if you wanted to rename something with an underscore, that was the only way to do that. And in our pipeline, we need to make sure we have that working.
What's the primary benefit?
Primary method?
The primary benefit.
Sorry.
Using the plugin.
Just to be able to organize things, and you can also put things in folders and subcategories. But there I wanted to just show you guys how many tools we had, but we labeled left arm, right arm, or hand. So you're able to organize that in a more better fashion for anybody to pick up and open up the file.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So for the next case study was how we create creatures and animals in our pipeline.
Can I ask you one more? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm sorry, I keep doing that to you. We've got a question coming in from Jay Hot online, one of our online people beating away at the keyboard to get a hold of you here. The question is, can you speak more about the details of how you ensure there was no overlapping among all of the roots? What steps did you take to ensure that the roots that you showed were not overlapping as they were spiraling up?
We just spent a lot of time making sure that all the, when we planar projected them, to make sure we did a bit of an offset, so that anytime you apply that alpha, you wouldn't see it right next to itself. So we would just cut the UVs a little higher or lower, so there's always some kind of offset. But at some point, when you have that many vines, it just becomes you just do it, and then you go back and tweak whatever looks repetitive.
Okay. I think also the question here from Jay Hot at Jay Hot is, also going back to the issue of the actual physical vines and how they were intertwined as well, not just with the UVing, but before that, the actual physical stuff. That's just a manual process?
That was just a
Is that
manual
fair?
process, but having ZBrush and transparency, we're able to see how we can offset that to help us make sure that there's no intersections.
Right.
And
So
of
that's
course,
the-
there might be a tiny 1-2% intersection, but
Right.
you can't see it when it's moving around.
So just good old-fashioned manual labor, you just beat the thing down and you get to where you got to get to. Classic
Yeah.
3D modeling. Right here, one more, and then we'll let him carry on for a second here.
Yeah.
Could be here all day. Go ahead, what's your name?
My name is Jaime.
Jaime, holy
Hi.
smoke.
Yeah.
What's the question?
It was like about that noise technique that you used in the vines. Like you said that you applied the same technique to every vine. Like I wanted to know if there's like a way to script and make like a way to
Automate.
to
Is there a way to script it? He's asking. Scripting the detail of. Right.
like that, like the noise. Is there any way to script?
I think there is. We just didn't do it at the time because we had to deliver this asset actually 2 times. One where it was a lot more surface and less vine stuff for D23, which is like a Disney convention, and then we had to deliver the final one for the film. But we didn't have time to do any scripting. But yeah, it could be automated since we have those 3 presets. Just have it run through each one of the processes.
It's also, it's pretty predictable when you're doing it manually.
Yeah.
It takes more time, obviously, but it also circumvents maybe getting into automated processes that might, uncover some sort of unknown.
Yeah, you can kind of
That's
see
fair.
the results right
Right.
away. If you see something that's off, you could take care of it before you move on to 50
Right.
more vines, and it becomes a bigger issue.
Thank you. That's a very good, that's a good response.
Also, because Noisemaker is an external plugin part of it too.
Internal, yeah,
so the
internal.
coding, it's not as easy as you can create a macro and just like apply it to everything else. It doesn't apply the same way. So you would take like a little bit more intense coding to actually get that to work. So yeah, and you wouldn't get the visual feedback that you guys were having at the time.
Yeah.
That's a good point, too, because you wouldn't get the immediate feedback, right? Like
Yeah.
as you're seeing.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's also a very good point. Thank you. Okay, carrying on. Nice one, guys. Hey, this is going really well, right?
Yeah.
Pretty.
So whether we have 3 weeks to create a moose or we have 4 months to create a pig that I'll show you guys after this, this is kind of the techniques we use to create creatures and animals in our pipeline. So for this spot, we had to create a moose that was photoreal. One of our main things to make sure we do every time is collect real reference, and the main part is skeletal reference because we do a muscle system, so we need to make sure we can anchor any muscles and double check all the anatomy on this. A really important resource online is Digimorph. They do CT scans of animal skulls and sometimes animal skeletons, but you're able to download the STL. So I was able to bring in the STL to ZBrush and then start blocking the head out and then start creating the skeleton after that. So here's what we started with, which as you guys can see doesn't look very photoreal, but the only thing we kept was the antlers. So I dynameshed those guys and started fixing those in ZBrush. So after those were detailed based on photographs, I started creating the skeleton. Just taking a sphere and then dynameshing it, shaping it to the skeleton based on the reference. And after that was blocked out, I started creating a C-sphere block out. From there, making adaptive skin out of that. And this is all happening within probably a day or 2. And then start blocking the base, planes. And then spending a couple more hours just fine-tuning some of those primaries and secondary planes so that everything feels, kind of organic.
Is this a Canadian moose?
It's,
Is it a
yes.
Canadian moose, like me?
Sure.
Yes. Success.
So one really important part that we can do from here that we do in our pipeline is create a ZBrush model that animation can start blocking out their scenes in. Then from there, that buys me time to start working, refining the shapes, and also doing the topology on that model. From there, we take one step back and start creating all the muscles in ZBrush, just getting a sphere, pulling it, and make sure that it's connecting to the right spots. So after that's created, we go back and refine the model just in case something seems off. Now that we know the anatomy is correct, we go and refine that, and after that, we add a little bit of fat, just to make sure he doesn't feel like he's been working out at the gym every day,
I'm the moose.
And here's the spot that he was featured in. Guess no audio.
And we covered it. July 1st, 2015. Talk to farmers. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
And here's a little bit of the making of that so you guys can see how all that comes into play.
Yeah, that was awesome. You're not moosing around. Right?
Yep. So another character that uses the same type of pipeline with a lot more surface detail, since the moose was full of fur, is Okja. He was another character that we had to do for extreme close-ups for a Netflix original, but he had about 4 months worth of work, so you can see that if you spend a lot more time in ZBrush, you can really achieve more realism and a lot more detail. And here's Okja in ZBrush. You guys can see we really spent a whole bunch of time detailing this guy out. He was a combination of a hippo and a rhino, so that's kind of what we used for our base. And his base mesh was also a lot more dense just because he had to, have a lot more detail. Here's some close-ups of his face. Some close-ups of other parts of his body. And a little bit of making of him as well. You guys have audio? now Leo's going to
That
talk
was
to you
cool.
guys.
Yeah, right on. Miguel Guerrero, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. That was the butt of the issue at the end there.
All right, all right. All right, let's do this. So,
Leo, how do you feel up there?
I feel good.
Yeah?
I feel good. It's good to be back, you know?
Yeah.
After 4 years, like,
This
as you know.
The
you
hero has
said,
come home.
We do.
Sometimes
we do.
Yeah, sometimes
You know,
they do
I
that.
missed it. I missed it. So, as you said, like, I'm an undergrad too, and I've been here, stayed here since 2011 until 2014. And then I miss LA. Up in Vancouver, there, it's like, you know, all rainy and cold. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's not the first Canadian city I think of, but that would be, you know, sort of another topic for another time.
But
Toronto.
You know, it's good. All right, let me just try to minimize this guy here for a second. And where is the thing?
It's leaking water. It's leaking water.
All right, let's start with this guy. Let's do it like this. All right, cool. So I'm going to mostly talk to you guys. Not sure how does this work. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Day one, ship leaving the harbor. Sailors hugging and kissing, family members, you know, these types of things. It's to be expected. Tears. And in a moment, the ship starts to set out again. Here we
We'll
are.
be back after the short break.
Yeah, we will be back. Brought to you by ZBrush.
A little message from our sponsors.
Globally recognized as the digital clay sculpting solution for artists. Don't forget, the gallery show is going to be a real nice thing to see. That's going to happen on Saturday evening. Hey, Kevin, what's up? Hey. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Okay, nice. Kevin Garcia, ladies and gentlemen, here we are.
I know.
So you never know who you're going to bump into at the ZBrush Summit. I mean, you just bump in. You just keep bumping into people.
Do you need a drink?
Front and center, here we are. So what do you got going on today?
We have.
Tell us who you're here with, first of all.
I'm here with the Braille Institute.
We're here with the Braille Institute, so in the front row here, right? Thanks for coming. Really nice. Yeah, welcome. Yeah, round of applause. Absolutely. And I want to say that the Braille Institute, was kind enough to present us with an award once, so many years ago, for our continued work together. So yeah, I mean, it's really nice to see all of you and have you all here, and we're gonna have some fun, right? I mean, so I think that Leo might be ready to take the stage again, but that was a nice little interlude. It's nice to know who's around. You never know who you're sitting with. This is the joy of the ZBrush Summit. You never know who you can rub elbows with.
1 second.
Really a ton of cool stuff outside as well. So in between, during the breaks. There will be food trucks.
All right.
And just before I let you take off again,
Please.
before we push the boat out into the harbor, give it a swift kick, make sure it gets out there. Don't forget that we are available at #ZBrush Summit, okay, if you're trying to get a hold of us for questions and those types of things. Without further ado, a colleague and friend for many years, Leo Krajden.
Thank you, guys. Cool, so I'm gonna be talking a little bit about how we actually did the dragon for Thor Ragnarok, and how we actually use HD geometry to actually get all the details done, and what was the approach, how we actually got to do the asset itself. So first I want to show you guys just a little clip of the actual, yeah. You know, followed by your standard demo reel music, you know, the usual. So as you can see, there's like some pretty close-up shots, and we have to make like the full body and figure out how things are gonna be, and as well as super close-up of the face, so we get like really, really close, and you know, really close. So we had to put some major details on this guy. So, all right, let me just try to get this close, this guy, please. I'll tab it to this. All right. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how they actually did the briefing with me. It's kind of funny. They go like, hey, Leo, do you want to work on Thor Ragnarok? And I go like, yes, please, now. Let's do it. And, and they go like, all right, cool. So we have a creature for you. And I'm, all right, I'm stoked. It's like, we have a dragon. It's like, oh, dude, I'm going to make a dragon. It's going to have like, you know, giant wings. I'm going to put like 8 legs and horns and teeth. It's going to breathe fire. It's going to be amazing. Maybe has 8 eyes. And they're like, yeah, easy, Tiger. So the thing is like this. It's a dragon, but it's like a dog. But he has no wings. But he has horns. And his skin is made out of lava. But he can't breathe fire. And I'm like, all right. So maybe I'm going to need a little bit more than that. So it's like, all right, cool. So no problem. We'll hook you up. So please do this. So Ian Joyner gave us some awesome concepts that we could actually go about. I was like, oh, all right, I see it. So it has like a long tail, as in a dragon. The face is kind of like a dragon. The body is kind of like a dog. It has like a Fu Manchu whisker vibe going on with goat horns. And his back's on fire, and he's all made out of charcoal. And I go, yeah, exactly. That's what's up. Plus, you know, there's one more thing. Yeah, his head's going to get chopped off, and he's going to have green blood. And I was like, green blood? And they're like, yeah, but he's made out of lava. It's like, well, you know, his blood's going to spill all over the ladies, and, you know, they will kind of melt. So we'll keep it green blood, and we'll see what happens. I was like, cool, awesome. So let's get to it. Based on that, I opened, let me go to my ZBrush. And as every great ZBrush sculptor, I started from a cylinder, because, you know, I want to get famous on Instagram. So I didn't even cap the top. That's how aggressive I was about it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to start with that pole right there. No, I'm kidding. So as we go about, we start doing a skeleton for it, right? So we get the proportions that we want to do. We want to see how this thing moves, how this thing works, how we get a feeling for it. So after they were okay with this, and we kind of figured out how the joints are going to be, you know, it's not 100% scientifically accurate, but, you know, which dragon is? We go about making some muscles for it. Let me actually have both together. So we add some muscles on top so we can have like a nice volume, and I can put the skin on top of it and feel how things are going to go, and actually like try to keep things accurate. It doesn't have a head, but, you know, nobody cares. So, all right, let's actually put some skin on this guy. So, all right. So this is our guy, and
Wait, you just pressed the button?
yeah. Right?
And I guess that's the power of ZBrush.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. So see you next year. So yeah, that's how you go from a cylinder to this.
I give up.
So, no, I'm actually not exactly here to talk to you guys how to actually we get from that to this, like how to actually get the actual major forms in it. I'm actually want to talk to you guys about how we use HD geometry to do the surfacing. And talk a little bit how to demystify like what people are kind of like afraid of going HD, right? Who isn't? But first of all, I want to actually show you guys the full model. And so this is what we ended up as far as like the full model, right? So it has like goat horns, Fu Manchu, some crackling things where like the vents are gonna come out because he has armpit rockets, right? Yeah, that's how we fly now. Armpit, it's on World of Thor, everything is possible. Let's do it. So let me just go to, sorry, this guy here, and I want to isolate him. And I'm going to step down a little bit of my subdivisions so I can show you guys a little bit of the polyframes. So as you can see, we even added like pockets for the fire to be stored. But you know, it only comes out of the armpits, not the mouth. And all right, I blocked out. I got my major forms. I got everything I needed. And I said, like, all right, it's time to surface. They approved it. They liked it. Let's start surfacing this guy. So I was like, hey, guys, I want to start this approach of actually using HD geometry to do the surfacing. One of the reasons, and especially the main one, is going to actually allow me to keep the mesh as one whole mesh without having to chop it off to add the detail to it. Especially if you ever did anything with scales, you know what I'm talking about. It's super painful. You run out of memory, or you run out of detail. You can choose one of the two. So that way, I don't have to chop it off the mesh, export displacement maps, blend it in a separated application, figure out and render it all together. I decided to do it all in ZBrush and export the maps out using the multi-map export. So in that case, you have to prep your mesh before you want to go into HD mode. And that's like very, very important so you can know what you're going to get. So the first step is to actually divide it and have it into polygroups. So as you can see, I have it like different polygroups for like pretty much everything. And so we will be able to actually get a high fidelity amount of detail. So I'm going to step it up right now until my highest subdivision right now. It's going to chug a little bit. So right now I'm at 22 million, right? And that's without going HD. So if I get close here, like we would get to the face, you can start to see that you see all faceted areas of the model, and you can't really hold the detail to a point that we really wanted to when we get that close. So I was like, okay. I go about dividing the sky, separating into polygroups. Let me just isolate the face. I go into my Geometry HD tab. And if you never use HD, what it does is actually like it creates like a tube of high definition polygons. It super divides your mesh into that area, and it allows you to sculpt a lot more detail, and you have like a way higher fidelity to sculpt and paint. So if I pressed the Sculpt HD with both sides of the face on right now, what it will do, it would actually create like a tiny selection that's actually taking both eyes at the same time into that area. And what that will do is just like, if I separate it into just a polygon for this side, my radius of polygons that I can actually have, it's a lot larger. So here I divided this mesh into 2 HD subdivisions, right? So now I'm stepping into HD subdivision number 1, and right now I'm at like 2.9 million polygons. And to get into HD, the hotkey is A, but I changed it to F1 because I pressed A too much by mistake. And you hover it on, and you press your HD button on it, and then, you pray. It works. 60% of the time, it works every time. And so there you go. It's ready now. So now I'm at 11.7 million, and just for the face, right? So now all those polygons that were busted are now with a little bit more definition. So let's choose like one of these guys, right? And you can see now that I can actually sculpt on this tiny piece of scale.
It's like picking your nose digitally.
Yeah. Literally and metaphorically.
Yeah.
So this way, I'm able to actually lay out my alphas and extract the most amount of detail that I can. And having the option to have like 2 different subdivision levels of my HD allows me to get like broader detail to parts that are not as important as like the rest of the body. But in the face, I'm able to actually go into the next subdivision level. So let me step out for a second. Just bear with me. And so for every time you have to go into HD, you're going to have like this little load time, right? And one thing that you need to be slightly mindful is once you're out, you're out. You're committed to this change that you did, unless like you have it in a layer, right? That you can slide it through it. But if not, and if you start stacking some layers, sometimes you start having an issue that once, instead of actually be able to slide, you'll either be like on or off. So I think it might be like case dependent, but I have a few cases that once I start stacking a bunch of layers of detail, once of them allow me or not to actually keep it. But normally what happens is just like you have a one-step undo of all you did into HD. So that will normally happen if you do it without a layer. So let's say I sculpted something on this guy into HD, and it was like many strokes. But if I undo it, it's just one stroke, and you lost everything you did in HD. So, but you can step further again. It's okay, it's not fully lost. But it's something that you have to be mindful that like you need to be ready at a spot that you can commit to be adding those type of details. Right, so now I'm gonna actually jump into my second subdivision level. Let me just isolate this guy again. And I'm gonna jump into the same place. So what it does is, like, since it creates this radius around your polygons, you can never enter HD at the same time twice. So pretty much everything that you do in HD stays in HD. You know, it's kind of like spring break.
You were getting very philosophical there for a moment.
Yeah.
You can never enter HD twice. But what
Yeah, not
happens in
exactly on the
HD
same
stays
place.
in HD. It's like Las Vegas.
Yes. It creates a radius based on your mouse, your cursor is on your mesh. So you never be able to actually get the same place twice. Right, so as you see now, it cut off my mesh into some areas, right? So all this part here that was there on my poly group, it's not there anymore. Which leads us to like another rule of HD is like you never touch the edges. It's like a rule. It's like if you found a random syringe on the street, you just don't touch it. You just let it be.
I think they say, yeah, that's really good advice. Leo, this guy's hitting all the marks today. You got street
Right?
sensibilities and ZBrush.
You know, it's not
all in one.
just art, guys.
If you find the needle, why did your mind go there, first of all? The bowels, of course, yes, where we are, of course, we're in the, the armpit of Hollywood. But if you see it, yes, it should go without saying, if you find a needle on the street, don't touch the damn needle.
It's pretty good.
I like that. Don't touch the needles.
It worked so far.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we were playing with this guy, so let's, at this level, you can even go.
But not playing with needles.
No.
No.
You can have more detail, even smaller type of geometry, right? And you can sculpt and add and really refine your mesh. Like, we're never going to get this close, so if you have time, you can actually do this. But if not, then your alphas become so much crisper, and you can actually get like so much more out of that resolution because it has those polygons in that mesh. So once you extract them out, you're actually able to get 100% of what you did. And if you spend time actually creating your alphas and doing like a really nice detailed alpha, it really pays off in the end once you're gonna get to something really detailed. So now I'm gonna show you guys how I actually go about actually using my alphas in ZBrush. Just like a quick little demo, how I actually use it to, since you have like especially scales, sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big, you have to blend from big to small. It's like a big nightmare. There's a few ways to actually do this. You could either paint on all the scales at once and then apply it to your mesh, or you can use an external application to do that painting and then bring out the displacement after that. I decided to do mine in ZBrush. So we're gonna go back here to our humble beginnings. Let me subdivide this. I'm just gonna demo on this one because the dragon will take like so much time to do it. So we come here to our texture, we load. Let me import. And one good thing about this is just like, if you take time to do your alphas, these alphas, once applied, they actually can store height information. So you can actually have like high detailed, you can use your grab docs or anything that you actually spend time refining it to actually extract that nice detail out. All right, so now we're gonna just turn this guy on. Let me scale it down. Let's say we love it. Here's where we want it to be. And then one cool little thing is, come back, come by me. You can, not sure if everybody knows, but you can nudge. Come on, nudge. Nudge. All right, cool.
Your brush is really large.
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna nudge it now. I'm in pre-nudging. This is my pre-nudge stage.
Pre-nudge.
So you can actually refine, so say like, oh, I want these to be conforming to that fold that I have right there. And then let's say beautiful. This is the curve that I want. It's my favorite curve, and it's special. So now I'm gonna go into, let me just grab the standard brush. Let me just make to only paint. Let me paint this guy in. It's really fast.
I mean, you could do it by hand too. Like if
you can.
If you wanted to sit around and make a mask for each of those little skills.
Yeah.
We've seen a performance or presentation
You can
like
model
that.
each one
Yeah,
separately.
absolutely. This was done for Rango, by the way. For
Modeled
Rango's
each
face.
one?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It's like a puzzle.
It was like a labor of love.
They're so patient.
Or a test of sanity, I guess, you know.
But yeah, a lot of this stuff, it's manual. It takes time to actually do it. You have to go in after and refine them, but you're as good as your alphas. If you spend time to actually create them and you get like really nice detailed alphas, you'll be able to actually extract as much and not have to work as hard after that. So I did my poly paint here. Let me just turn off my texture here. So this is my poly paint. It's gorgeous. I'm gonna go to my masking, and then I'm gonna mask by intensity. And then I'm gonna hide my mask, right? I'm gonna turn off my poly paint color. I normally use my displace brush, and I change my alpha into surface mode. And what it does, it actually it defines the best midpoint gray out of your alpha, preserving previous detail that you had already behind the mesh, right? So now if we turn this guy off, and let me lower this guy just a titty bit, we start pulling off this detail. And you can pull it off as much as you want, right? So right before I do this, and my brush is really, really strong right now, I like to store a morph target. Maybe I'll start a layer. If not, if I'm feeling brave, then I'm not. But it's good to be able to revert that back. So you start just pretty much like painting it on, and where you don't want it, you just go back with your morph brush, and then you morph it back. And then you pretty much do that forever until it's all done. And then one day, maybe you see the light again. But pretty much that's the process that I did in my alphas, just to layer them on the dragon. And I spent, I think, around 3 days just prepping different alphas. So I'll be okay for different types of scale. Let
me ask you a question.
Yeah.
For the newer members of the clan here in the audience, and how many people are using ZBrush in the audience right now? Okay, a good number. Excellent. So, maybe just clarify what that is. You're taking an image and you're projecting it on there, or what's happening here?
What do you mean, now that I just
did?
did?
Yeah, just this business here.
All right, cool. Let's
It looks like a magic show. You just rolled in from out of town. You're talking about needles and some kind of business.
All right, let me step back, and let me just do this.
1 minute, there's a
in
dragon.
slow motion.
There's a beer can, for Pete's sake.
Let me slow motion this. So, and I won't use any shortcuts or hotkeys. So, let me just fill this guy in with white. So right now, I go into the texture tab, and then
you just get these pictures from the internet.
No, so the actual alpha process I processed in Photoshop.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was trying to get you to say.
Oh, that?
Yeah, you're making these things yourself.
Oh,
right?
yeah. So the alphas I process in Photoshop, and I apply it in ZBrush, and I sculpt it again on top.
Cool.
And then I use if you go here on alpha, you can actually, alpha here, you can actually grab doc, and you will store that information that you had on your model, and you create like a texture for you with the height information of that. So there you get like a higher fidelity alpha when you're actually doing these types of work, so you can lay out that detail on top.
Sweet, thanks.
That was it.
I'm always thinking of a newcomer, you know.
You know, sorry about that.
Oh, no,
just,
what are you sorry? What do you think?
I was speeding it up.
You've been hanging out in Canada too long. You said sorry, right? You're sorry? I'm sorry. No, you're sorry. We're all sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So now, what I would like to show you guys as well is, let me just get out of this. I like to show that I also used, I also used, I'm getting to it, ZBrush to actually do my painting.
Any questions at this point? Can I throw it out there to the audience members? Anybody have a question about what he's been showing so far? Oh, look, the hands have popped up. The shyness is slipping away as I climb the wall here.
Please, yeah. If you guys have any questions at any time, you know, Louis there.
I felt like I was in the
He'll
Matrix
hook you
for
up
half a second.
with
I
a
was climbing the
microphone.
wall.
We'll clear that out.
Cross the threshold of reality here. Check. Hey, what's your name?
My name's Jose.
Jose.
Hey,
Hey, nice to see you, man. Hey.
How much time are you given to sculpt out all this detail? And then what is the difference, in your opinion, between getting this detail in sculpt versus texture?
So,
good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So it actually took me
a month,
couple weeks, to a month.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of on and off because I was also doing like I also worked on Surtur and the Fire Demons, so I was just like jumping from. It wasn't just the dragon straight up. But I feel like if I picked up the time that I worked at the dragon, it was around like 2 weeks of detailing this guy, and I feel like pretty much of the way you lay out alphas, it's related to texture work as well too, since like you're extracting it from a texture. So I wanted to have, like, since we're gonna get so close to the face, I wanna be able to have that detail in my model, right? And I also wanted to be able to quickly do changes on it. I didn't wanna commit to a texture at that point. So if I wanted to change, like, we actually got to a point that this was really, really crispy, charcoal. Like burned wood texture, like with the striations of everything. But it got to a point that was really noisy. So not actually having all my texture and everything done at that point allowed me to actually go back to a more like leathery, charcoaly feel to it without actually losing any of that. So I wanted to I just rather have this on my model at this point because it was more versatile for me. And I also had like a bunch of layers that I could toggle and smooth that out and whatnot of different levels of detail. So I don't think there is a right way of doing it. It's just the way I chose. You can do both ways. You can paint it all in and extract your textures out of it.
Yeah, that's important to note. There's several different ways to go about that process. I know you can't see me because I'm hiding amidst the people. Yeah, there's definitely several different ways to go through that or to get to that end.
Yeah.
I got one more way in the back here. Say, let me just turn the power on again here. What's your name?
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, you know him?
Sorry?
You know him?
Yeah.
Holy
yeah,
smoke.
he's my teacher.
Oh, cool, Lisa. Okay, Lisa, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, at what stage do you apply the alphas? Is it at the HD geometry or before that?
The texture, you mean?
The alphas.
At what stage are you adding the alphas?
So no, the alphas
model?
I applied for pretty much this side of the body. I applied at level 1 of the HD geometry. And then from the neck further, I applied most of it on level 2 of the HD geometry. But yeah, it pays off so much better if you are already at that stage once you drag those alphas in, especially since this was such a large asset. And I wanted to be able to have that high fidelity of the polygons to what I do, so I didn't have to do that much correction later on.
Nice.
Was that it?
Yeah. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
good. There is
Cool.
a process. It looks like mania, but there is definitely a process. Anybody else? Don't be shy.
Don't be shy, guys.
He doesn't bite. Not yet. It's not Saturday night. Here we go. We have one more over here. What's your name?
Karen.
Karen, over here to the left.
It's Kara, but that's cool.
Carol?
It's all right.
Carol.
Kara.
Kara. Excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen,
bad.
Kara.
I slurred.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kara.
Get it
think
right,
you slur.
Louis.
Listen to me talk for 5 minutes. Holy.
When you do the skeleton, do you use like a kit bash or do you build them fresh each time?
We actually built it for this guy. And one thing is just like, on this, specifically this muscle system, every piece is the same. So each muscle have the same amount of polygons. And for the skeleton itself, it was more random, just like pretty much dragging and just getting the shape. You know, obviously you duplicate it around, but let me just hide this guy. So duplicate it around, but and I think, if I'm not wrong, the scapula, I took it from something else. And then I modified it to get to this stage. But yeah, now we can use this to actually make other stuff. You know, have your own library of bones.
Yeah, we have a few. We have a skeleton, a human skeleton, and then we have a few like a horse and a dog, and then we try to recycle from those.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story going through the airport with a bunch of action figure body parts in a container, and the lady at the desk asked me, what's with the body parts? And anyway. And then I had also a book with me, which is, speaking of libraries of parts, it said, How to Talk to Children So They'll Listen. It's a very awkward situation. You can imagine the TSA, right?
So
Sorry.
I just want to touch up just a few benefits of actually using HD geometry. So in my case, it's pretty much the speed that I could actually do larger changes to the model itself. So if they actually had changes that needed to be done to its proportion or not, and I didn't have my mesh all chopped up, it was like faster for me to actually do those changes. Also, my alphas were a lot cleaner, and you know, I got so much resolution out of that HD. And it was really able to give me all my auxiliary maps. So I was able to extract my cavities, my surface, my curvature, my ambient occlusion out of the HD, and I used that on my texturing process. And what to look out for, as in, like, you know, like a no-go zone, it's like pretty much what I said before about the edges. You have to prep before you go. It's good that you're at the good stage, that you prep your model and you know that you're ready for surfacing when it gets into that, because you start having like a lot of polygons stored. You might jump into a file that's too big. So sometimes, I remember that at the time when I had this guy with all my layers, I had to actually have all the other parts on a different subtool. It was like a different file because it got too large. As well as, you know, if you duplicate your subtool, you lose the HD. So sometimes, like, oh, I'm good with this, I'm gonna duplicate this guy, and then so I have like another one, and I wanna try some different things, I wanna push and pull, and then you delete the other one on top, and when you see it, you're 3 saves later, you go back into HD, and it's not there anymore. Because, so you can't duplicate your subtool with its HD. So once you duplicate it, it's gone. You lose it. Gone forever. Now, how about do you go, if you ask, hey, Leo, how do you get this thing out of ZBrush? So there's 2 ways to do it. The painful way and the way I normally use it, which is just exporting maps, right? So you can just use if you go to the Z plugin, and you go to the all right, I'm almost there. Multi-map exporter, you can just like generate all your maps. Simple like that. You go to your displacement map. ZBrush knows that you have geometry, HD geometry stored in there, so you don't need to be in geometry HD for them to come out. Like, he knows. Just trust the system. And, right? And the one thing is just like I figured out by experiment that turning on adaptive, in some cases, especially if you're using like vector displacement brushes, so you're really pushing that geometry out. Like let's say some of these horns, I actually use like a vector displacement to actually add them to the mesh, and it's actually stretching them out a lot. And your first level didn't actually have those horns in it. Adaptive will actually solve most of those cases at a cost. So it takes a long time to actually export. I think all the displacement maps out of this guy took, with adaptive, 6 hours, without adaptive, 2. So it's a good thing to have it in mind and keep it in that. And then the other way to actually do this is you do all your sculpt, you have your mesh already, and let's say I want to have the geometry that I have from HD out, the specifically geometry. Because right now, once you step out, it goes back to your normal non-Super Saiyan geometry, and you want to keep that. And so to do that is, you did all your details, you're all good, you go to your geometry tab, you go to crease, you crease by polygroup border, so we do that. Now, you isolate one of your guys. I'm just gonna jump into HD again, but I'm gonna jump it on sub-tool level 1 just so it's a bit faster.
Can I ask you a quick question while you're doing that? There's a question from online.
All right.
What did you use to create that alpha for the tree? Was it like a tree bark or some kind of dry river, mud, or lava?
The reference I had to see for this.
Oh, I understand.
That was.
Yeah, it's a family show, so deep dive into Google.
That's why I
I
didn't bring my reference board,
right,
because
good.
it was sad. Some really scary stuff. But most of it I got after seeing some sad things.
Okay.
It was from tree barks. Pretty much just burned tree barks of different kinds and different trees.
Yeah.
And then.
Not to be confused with like shibui, which is a different type of Japanese woodworking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So pretty much was just like tree barks that I modified the alphas and I sculpted until I get the result that I wanted. So this guy's now 11 million polygon HD geometry. So what you do now at this point, you clone it. So the way to do this is you clone out each of your polygroups.
Yep.
It's the only way. So now you have one mesh. It doesn't have, it has like 2 levels of subdivision. It has at 11 million. But that's all you get. And then after this, you go to your plugin again, and you have, I'm not going to decimate it because it will take forever. But you have to have freeze borders on, and then you can pre-process this guy. And at that point, if you do it for all the other parts of the body and you have it all together here, decimated, I advise to decimate one by one before bringing the other ones because it will crash. You can go to merge, and you can merge down with weld. And what it does is, since we're creasing by polygroup and we also freeze the borders, it's going to keep all the polygons in the border to stay at the exact same place there. But all the other polygons are going to be fanned out. So it's going to create like a fan of, the ZBrush witchcraft decimation thing. That I don't know how it works, but I love it. And you keep that border really sharp, and you'll connect perfectly to all the other subtools. And that's how you get it out. And that's it.
Yeah, cool. So there's a couple of, a round of applause. How about it, everybody? Video and Miguel from Marvel Studios. Got a couple of really important questions here. Didn't know I was going to do that, did you?
Nope.
Be careful. I come up here, we start doing interviews. Okay, that was a wonderful presentation. I appreciate that. Everybody here appreciates that. A couple of questions from the online folks. There's a question from Felipe Ribeiro. Maybe he's Portuguese or Brazilian. Bom dia. How much time do you usually spend on a character for something like Infinity War, for example? Thanks, you guys rock.
Cool. It depends. We had to do a lot of digital doubles. I think for Groot, we spent about 2 months.
Okay.
And for Thor and E3, we had about 4 weeks or so.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Basically 2 months
2 months for a superhero
for
character.
a superhero character to
And-
get done. 2
Yeah.
months.
And digital
or-
doubles about 4 weeks.
And a digital double's 4 weeks, so a month for a digital double. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's a really great result on screen, and I think that unanimously everybody can say that. Another question comes from someone named Octo J.
Cool
Enemy
name.
to Spider-Man, perhaps. Is it just me, or does anyone remember Spider-Ham? Never mind. It's almost lunchtime. He says here, or they say, did you set up the initial hair look dev for the moose in ZBrush? And if so, what was the growing process like? Did you set up the initial hair look dev for the Canadian moose in ZBrush? And if so, what was the grooming process like?
No, we actually used Action for that. But we did make a version that had the volumes so that animation could kind of see that
Cool.
in the viewport.
It's sweet. I really like that spot. They do some really great work, and you do some really great work in that regard as well. Okay, so once again, put your hands together, right? I got a round of applause. Miguel and Leo from Method.